What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Chill, where I, Graham Jason Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network. Today we're talking Chapter 1 of the all-new Undertaker The Last Ride series on the WWE Network, entitled The Greatest Fear. I've been looking forward to the show for a long time now, ever since it was announced, around WrestleMania time? They aired that first look right after, I want to say, Night 2 of WrestleMania. I think it was after Night 2 of WrestleMania that they aired the first look on the Undertaker show. I feel like they aired the preview for it, like the teaser, the 30-second teaser, during Night 1, and then they randomly aired the first look, which was like 15 minutes long, on Night 2, and it hooked me. Now, if you watch the first look, all they really do, I don't even want to say the best parts, but they take the highlights from Episode 1, and they pack it into like 13 or 14 minutes. It's not the first, it's not the first 13 minutes of the first episode. It's not the final 13 minutes of the first episode. It's merely jumbled in highlights and whatnot to get you hyped up for Episode 1. So just because you saw that first look does not mean that you've seen Episode 1 in its entirety by any means. I mean, obviously, but what I mean is that simply because you saw the first look does not mean, there's no reason to watch the first episode. That is bullshit. This is great stuff. This is exactly, and I cannot say this enough, I cannot say this often enough, this is exactly the type of content that the WWE Network was made for, that it should be for, that I want to see from the WWE Network. The 24s are awesome, the Chronicles are great, the Day Ofs are great. They've been doing a lot of great work with the network. And it's been around for 6 years now. You would think, they did their best stuff in the beginning. Honestly, I feel like they're doing their best stuff now. The documentary-style stuff from the network are among my favorite things on the platform. The ride-alongs, the Table for Threes, the silly shows like Legends House and Camp WWE. I was never a big fan of that show, but the first episode was all right. It was kind of downhill from there, but they tried. Too Hot for TV or Too Hot to Handle, whatever the hell that Jerry Springer-style show was about 5 years ago. They're doing their best stuff now. So if you have the WWE Network, or even if you don't have the WWE Network, consider signing up for the stuff like this. If you don't give a shit about the pay-per-views, the old pay-per-views, I'd be surprised, but the new pay-per-views, I get it. I actually decently liked Money in the Bank. I know that's neither here nor there on this review. I thought it was an alright show overall. The undercard lacked excitement for certain matches. Like, I liked McIntyre Rollins. I liked the Fatal 4-Way Tag Team title opener. The main event I thoroughly enjoyed. Anyway, if you don't give a shit about the live pay-per-views, that's totally okay. But I think paying $9.99 a month for stuff like this is well worth it. And this is only one episode. It's not even like, a big 24 on The Undertaker's final match, or, just one mere special on his final few days of his last match. Like, this goes back a long time. As I'll discuss here, this goes way back to 2017. So again, it's not like, they cover his final match of WrestleMania 36 and the Boneyard match or whatever, This goes back a very long time. And I think there's going to be 6 episodes or 5 episodes maybe. They did one on Sunday. So what they did was, and I'm talking about it now, I could have very easily watched this on Sunday, but because they put it up on demand first thing Sunday morning. They were promoting it as, they're premiering it after the Money in the Bank pay-per-view. That's when I watched it. But it actually went up on Sunday morning. So if you're not already aware of this, what they've been doing in recent months is putting up the content that they're premiering on that day. They actually put up that morning at 10 a.m., which I freaking love. For me personally, because it gives me a chance to watch it ahead of time, review it, put up the video either that day or the very next day. I waited to watch this because I watched the Money in the Bank pay-per-view at Alexis's house. And I was like, if I'm going to watch it for the first time, I want to watch it with her and her family, and they loved it too. So I'm looking forward to watching every episode going forward, but just keep that in mind that every episode, I believe, drops on that Sunday morning around 10 a.m. So I think the next episode drops next Sunday, first thing next Sunday, and then the next one after that is the Sunday after that, so like the weekend of Double or Nothing. So we had Mother's Day next Sunday, the 17th, the third one, the 24th. Then I think they're taking about a 3-week break. They're not airing one the 31st. They're not airing one June 7th, I don't think. They're saving the 4th episode until, I think, the day of the Backlash pay-per-view, which we found out last night. That's the June pay-per-view this year. June 14th is episode 4. And then I think episode 5, so I think there's 5 episodes, is going to be Sunday, June 21st. So anyway, episode 1, chapter 1 as they're calling it, The Greatest Fear. We hear from Undertaker to kick the thing off. He talks about how he's going to walk away when people think that he has a lot more left in the tank. Which I'd argue we are well past that point. We are well past that point. Maybe this year at WrestleMania, even I was saying I think he could get years out of going back to doing the American Badass gimmick. The whole Phenom thing ran its course a long time ago. I'm a big Taker fan, love the guy, love the Phenom character, but him doing that shtick ran out its course a long time ago. So I think we were well past the point of thinking, oh, Taker has more years, more whatever, more matches in the tank. Maybe with the American Badass gimmick. Beyond that, he really doesn't. He is well past his expiration date, so I wouldn't even say that. But anyway, he goes on to say that, he doesn't know when to quit. He admits he doesn't know when to quit, and he started to question himself. Ask whether he can still do this, if he still has enough left in the tank, should he retire, blah, blah, blah. He said that he almost, his wife almost became a widow, and his 2 daughters, I believe, they didn't really talk too much about his family. I know he's married to Michelle McCool. They have daughters, I believe, because she was holding a daughter in the front row of one of his matches at one of these WrestleManias. So they have kids. I think he has 2 daughters. They didn't really talk too much about them. I think it's 2 daughters. But he said that his 2 daughters almost became fatherless after that Goldberg match, basically implying that he almost died in that match, which, honestly, he ain't wrong. Goldberg almost died in that match. He almost dropped Goldberg right on his fucking head when he dropped him with the tombstone. That match was a complete train wreck. So it's like he'll go through these phases real quickly before we go any further. He'll go through these phases where it's like, oh yeah, he still has it. Like he can still go. For example, after WrestleMania 28, I would say, they don't say it here, but I think that should have been it. 20-0, perfect. That Triple H match, maybe not the greatest Undertaker match of all time, not even as good as the Shawn Michaels matches at WrestleMania, but it was still a very good match. That was an awesome match. They fucking killed it at WrestleMania 28, 20-0. Great, loved it, awesome stuff, and he continued to come back. Had a great match, had a great performance with CM Punk at WrestleMania 29. Awesome stuff. Then he shits the bed with the WrestleMania 30 match. I know part of that was because he was concussed, which I'll get to. Then it's like, okay, I'm done because I can't do this anymore. He almost retired after that match, figuring that he couldn't go anymore. So he redeemed himself with WrestleMania 31, 32, the Brock matches, whatever. And then he had another bad match with Reigns, and it's like, okay, that should be it. So it's like he really doesn't know when to quit. It's not like, oh, I'm going to go out when I have my last great match, because he's had a lot of good matches over the last 5 years. Those Brock matches, not the first one at WrestleMania 30, but the ones later on in the latter half of 2015, I thought were great. I was there for the SummerSlam one. I thought that was a great match. I thought the Hell in a Cell match was also one of Taker's better matches in the last decade, I would say. And he still couldn't call it quits. So it's not like, oh, I'll leave after my last bad match thinking I can't do it anymore. He doesn't even do that. So the guy doesn't know when to quit. So this documentary, this docuseries, I should say, takes place from 2017 through 2020. He said that he contacted Vince 3 days before WrestleMania 33 to allow his career to be documented for the very first time. He's been on cameras. He's done like the whole Mark Calloway thing where he's not exposed himself. That sounds weird. Get your money out of the gutter, people. He has shown his true colors as Mark Calloway before in documentaries and DVDs, stuff like that. But it's never really been about him. Now, I know he did the Stone Cold podcast, but prior to that point, I don't think we've ever really seen Undertaker out of character doing stuff out of character. And he just wants to know what happened to him. He doesn't know if he can keep up with the young guys anymore, and that includes Roman Reigns going into this WrestleMania 33 match. They show a shot, and this was a part of the first look, where they show him checking into the hotel, WrestleMania weekend. And, he jokes about with Roman, you can't keep kayfabe for 20 minutes, because it's like you see Taker and Roman checking into the hotel together, and they were supposed to be fighting at WrestleMania that weekend, not like anyone really takes it seriously anymore. And then you see like the bell clerks and other people at the hotel desk like laughing, and it's like, do you even know what's going on here? But anyway, he goes on to say that he knows that he can't work a full-time schedule anymore. They go all the way back to his debut at Survivor Series 1990. You know what? People can shit on Hartford all they want. Connecticut is not an amazing state. I love my home state of Connecticut. In terms of wrestling shows, we have not hosted the greatest of events. WrestleMania 95 comes to mind. WrestleMania, what was it, 11? Fucking one of the worst WrestleManias of all time, obviously. But we can forever say that 30 years ago this year, in Hartford, we hosted the debut of The Undertaker. Ric Flair calls it the greatest character in wrestling history, which he said is Stone Cold on the Broken Skull Session show about a month ago on Easter. They actually say, and this is something I never knew, he actually debuted the eye roll, the signature eye roll that the Taker character does. That happened in a match with Greg Valentine, and it stuck, literally and figuratively. It stuck, and he's been doing it ever since. And we hear a lot from Vince McMahon on the special. We hear from his wife, Michelle McCool. We hear from Shawn Michaels, AJ Styles. We hear from Stone Cold Steve Austin. We hear from Ric Flair. We hear from Jim Ross, even Chris Jericho, two people who have since departed over to AEW and aren't like lower-level stars. It's the voice of AEW, and then their former inaugural AEW World Champion, Chris Jericho. So it's like, I mean, obviously all the footage is old. They filmed this a long time ago. But it was cool they were, not able, because they're able to do anything they want. It was cool they kept that footage and they didn't get rid of it. Because it's like, oh, they're in the opposite company, let's not include the footage, which is something they have done and, they have done before, and I assume will continue to do in different, in different forms and whatnot. I was glad they kept the footage. So, anyway. He talks about the streak and how someone mentioned to him one day. I don't know exactly when this would have been. Probably around WrestleMania 16, 17. I mean, he wasn't at 16, but maybe around WrestleMania 17, 18. Someone mentioned to him one day, or maybe even before that. I feel like if someone mentioned to him, before that or after that, or if it was before that, they would have made a bigger deal of the streak at WrestleMania. I don't think it was a big deal when he faced Flair. Or Triple H, for that matter. I feel like it wasn't a big deal until like WrestleMania 19, but... Anyway, someone mentioned to him, like, hey, you're undefeated at WrestleMania. And he was like, oh, cool. That's just so funny to me. Like, he's like, one day, like, oh, yeah, I'm undefeated at WrestleMania. Like, that's cool. Nice. Like, it was never the plan from the get-go is what I'm saying. Jim Ross says that Undertaker always stole the show at WrestleMania. And Taker says how the streak really was what allowed him to work once a year. Because that was the big attraction of WrestleMania for so long. They talk about the sacrifices that he's made to his body and how he beat up his body a lot. And as a result of that, he's had a whole process in recent years of preparing for this one match at WrestleMania. Like, he would spend literally months getting ready for one match, do the match, whether it be good, bad, or indifferent, he would rehab for the next 5 or 6 months. Like, how crazy is that? Like, he would spend the entire year building and recovering from one fucking match. That's just unbelievable to me. That's how beat up this guy's body was. Like, you would think, oh, the more he's on the road, like, he's going to get beat up more, which isn't necessarily the case. They talk about how that's a really tough thing to do. Even Triple H, chimes in and says how he's been doing the same thing in recent years, how it's hurt him mentally and physically. It's the hardest thing he's ever had to do, to wrestle once a year at WrestleMania. And Triple H has worked, a few more matches than Taker in recent years. 2014 comes to mind when he wrestled Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania, but then he went on to, like, do a bunch of matches with The Shield in the months after that. 2015, I don't think Triple H wrestled outside of WrestleMania. I mean, he has done house shows and shit like that. I'm not really sure if that counts. I mean, it counts. A match is a match. He just didn't really do much on TV. It keeps him special, sure. But at the same time, your body ain't used to taking the bumps. Like, these people that are on the road, yeah, it's hurting them to be on the bump or to be on the road so much, doing all these bumps. But on the flip side of it, your body is so used to taking bumps on a daily basis that it doesn't really think twice. Like, if I was to go out to a wrestling ring right now, granted, I'm not a trained professional, obviously, I never will be. I did do mixed martial arts for a while, about a decade ago, and up until a few years ago, consistently. Other than that, I've never been, I cannot claim to be a professional wrestler, all right? If I was to go out to a ring right now, which is still on my bucket list at some point, and took a bump, my body would be like, fuck no, do not do this. Because it's not used to, your body is not meant to take harm like that. It's not meant to take punishment. But if you do it so consistently, it just kind of gets used to it. Good, bad, or indifferent, it gets used to the pain that you're used to enduring when you're a professional wrestler. Taker, because he's older, his body just can't take that type of pain anymore. Even well before the WrestleMania 30 match, when he got messed up in the match with Brock. He's talking about WrestleMania 27, 28. He would do the one match a year, and he would be pretty messed up because his body just wasn't used to it, So we hear from Michelle, who says that Taker's in pain on a very regular basis, and people just will never understand how much pain he is in from a day-to-day basis. We see him training at the Performance Center for WrestleMania 33. We talked about, we go back a couple of years now leading up to WrestleMania 33 and WrestleMania 30 specifically. He said that he had hip issues. I don't know if it was going into WrestleMania 27, but definitely coming out of WrestleMania 27. 2010 was like the last year that Taker worked like a full-time schedule with WWE. He had the second match with Shawn at 26, and he worked, I remember one random Raw match that he had with Jack Swagger in April of 2010. And then he disappeared for a while, came back to feud with Kane, and he was working like 3 straight pay-per-view matches with Kane. I'm not sure if he was working on TV at all, but he worked a couple pay-per-view matches. Then he left again. And I think he was supposed to win, too. I think the end game of that feud was him beating Kane in that casket match, or buried alive, whatever, to win the World Heavyweight Championship. I remember reading that at one point, but it didn't happen because he needed surgery again. It was probably the hip thing. I don't know if he got his hurt hip, or if he hurt his hip in the WrestleMania match itself, but I tend to believe it was beforehand, which is why he was out for so long prior to WrestleMania 27. He wasn't around for the final, few months of 2010. He wasn't around for the, first few months of 2011 either. He just showed up, did the match at WrestleMania 27, and that was it. He disappeared again until it was time to promote the match for WrestleMania 28 with Triple H again at WrestleMania 28. So he had the hip issues, and he had to be carted off for WrestleMania 27. A match that I've kind of grown to like over the years. I didn't like it initially. I didn't like it for a long time. Went back and watched it a few times. I thought it was a good match. Could have been better, of course, but I thought it was a good match. Said he felt good at WrestleMania 28. Even better for WrestleMania 29 when he faced CM Punk, which they show the footage of, by the way. They don't, blur out his face. You don't even really see Punk, but it was cool they acknowledged the match. Then he says that he remembers absolutely nothing from WrestleMania 30. After about 3:30 p.m., he remembers absolutely nothing. That is so scary, because he doesn't know when he was concussed. So he got concussed in the match, of course, which we knew the day after the show, probably night of the show. And people said, that's why the match was so bad. Obviously that was a factor. I wasn't expecting an instant classic anyway, I don't think. I kind of had my hopes up because Brock was working more the MMA style. Taker works kind of an MMA style sometimes. I was looking forward to the match, but I don't think anyone was expecting Brock and Taker to steal the show that year. And the concussion just made it that much worse. It was just a terrible, terrible, terrible match. So he doesn't know when he got concussed. We hear from the trainer who was backstage that night, and he said that he knew something was wrong when Taker came backstage, and he was all jovial. He was all joyous for some reason. He was like, "Hey, what's going on, man? I feel great," like he was intoxicated or something. He knew something was up. He knew Taker was all fucked up in the head. So we went to the hospital. He collapsed, I guess. Vince went to the hospital with him, and Brock Lesnar. So people can shit on Brock all they want for being a piece of shit. He doesn't like people, blah, blah, blah. But, he was all in on Taker. They're very close from what I can tell. When Taker was backstage, I want to say at WrestleMania 33, he ran into Brock and they kind of shared a moment. It might have been WrestleMania 31, I don't remember. But Brock went to the hospital, and Brock, he wasn't on the first charter flight back to where he lives, Canada, I think now. He went to the hospital with Mark Calloway, which was pretty cool. But anyway, Vince was there too, and Taker even told him, he's like, "Dude, go back to the arena. You have a show to run." And Vince is like, fuck off. Whatever. I'm here to make sure that you're okay. So again, people can poop on Vince all they want. I know I sure do from time to time. But at heart, the guy has a heart. He's a good dude. He cares about his performers to an extent, at least when it comes to someone like The Undertaker. So I thought that was pretty cool. The issue is that he didn't even know his own name. He had asked Michelle, he kind of cheated a little bit on the test. They would ask him, what's your name? Where are you from? Where are you right now? He had no clue. He knew that Michelle McCool was his wife. He would go, "Hey, babe, what's my name?" He knew that they were, together, but he didn't even know his own name. How fucking scary is that? Again, that's so frightening. He didn't know his own name, they said, until, the next morning, until, 3:30 in the morning, which is very scary. So he credits, not taking bumps throughout the year. That caught up to him along with his age. Not taking the bumps consistently, and the fact that he was getting older really caught up to him that night. And that one night just supremely destroyed his confidence. So he goes into WrestleMania 31. We do not see The Undertaker on Raw or even WWE TV in general until WrestleMania itself. It was a lot like after he retired, or was supposed to retire, WrestleMania 33. And he came back for WrestleMania 34 with that match, quote-unquote, with John Cena. He was not on Raw prior to that point. I think he might have done Super Showdown after that, but we didn't see him back on TV for months and months and months. He was not on TV prior to WrestleMania 34 either, like I just said. Same case goes for WrestleMania 31. We don't see him on TV. Doesn't cut any promos or whatever. We don't see him until WrestleMania 31 itself. Bray Wyatt said that you would never know that there was anything wrong with the guy. It was just another night of the office. He was just another night of the office. Treated it like it was any, just a normal day, whatever. And Triple H told him before he went out there, and we see the footage of him telling him this, so it's not like Taker's misremembering or whatever. He told Taker, remember who the fuck you are. And that really got Taker ready. And by all accounts, Taker and Triple H are also very, very close. And they grew up in the same era. I mean, Triple H came years later. Taker debuted in 1990, so he was around for a while before Triple H came around. But, they've had their wars dating back to the early 2000s. They came up in the Attitude Era together. They had a match in 2002, I think at King of the Ring, which was a shit fest. But they've had better matches like at, WrestleMania 27, WrestleMania 28. They had their wars a couple of years ago in late 2018, but this was before all of that. Triple H just told him, just remember who the fuck you are. Go out there and just kill it, And the match wasn't great, but it was a way better match than what we expected or what we got at WrestleMania 30. The match with Bray was all right. It wasn't great, but, it was decent. And Taker got in the groove after that. He had the match with Bray. And Taker, it felt like he was on a farewell tour that year because he worked a lot of matches. I'm not sure about house shows and stuff like that, but he worked a lot of televised matches. He worked SummerSlam, which I was there for, which was cool. The match with Brock I thought was very good. The Hell in the Cell rematch, and I say rematch because they had that first Hell in the Cell match in No Mercy 2002, was great. That was one of the best Taker matches I've seen in the last decade. I love that match. I got to go back and watch that at some point. It was a really good match. Then he came back for a Survivor Series for the exact 25-year anniversary of his character in WWE at the same pay-per-view, not the same venue. I was going to say, God forbid they go back to Hartford, but they were actually in Hartford for Money in the Bank last year. So, fuck everyone who says poop on Hartford. But anyway, they did celebrate 25 years of Taker on the exact anniversary. The calendar for 2020 is the same as 2015, which means it's the same for 1990 as well, which means that Taker celebrates 30 years at Survivor Series on the dot this year. So I know this may have well been his last match at WrestleMania 36, the Boneyard match. But if he is going to wrestle again, as I kind of fear that he will, a 30-year anniversary at Survivor Series doesn't get much better than that. I think he teamed with Kane that night against the Wyatt family. It was what it was. Then he came back for WrestleMania 32. They show footage of that. I didn't really like that Shane match much at all. I just thought that was terrible. He doesn't shit on the match, but, they just show quick clips of it. They don't really leave anything out here, which is cool. But he does say that but he knew something was off with him. He just didn't feel right come Royal Rumble 2017, which I completely agree with. That performance by Taker that night, love the guy, it sucked. He did not look good. He did not look like he belonged. He looked out of shape. It just, I don't know, it didn't look good. It felt like one of those things where they didn't tell him ahead of time, hey, you're going to be in the match, blah, blah, blah. It felt like a last-minute thing for like, hey, Taker, can you do the Rumble? Because he announced himself for the Rumble, like not the night of, but like a couple weeks earlier. A couple weeks is not enough time. I mean, I'm just assuming here because he didn't say it here. But I don't think they told him ahead of time, like, hey, probably WrestleMania, but not the Rumble. Like, that's way too quick, and he just had a terrible performance. And he even said that, listen, it's going to kill me if I see a dad and a son type of situation where the dad says to the son, hey, that Taker's great, but he was way better back in my day. Like, he's just not good now. Like, I remember a time where he was great. He doesn't want to get into that type of situation. So we see him back at the Hall of Fame, backstage at the Hall of Fame in 2017, a few nights before WrestleMania 33. I think it was 2 nights before Mania 33. Because TakeOver Orlando, which I was at, was the night before. But anyway, so we see him talking to Bruno backstage, which is cool. Because San Martino died in 28. No, wait, did he die in 2017? Might have been 2017. I don't remember. But he died soon after this, so it was cool to see him interacting with Taker. And Taker even called him sir. Called him sir. That's the respect that Taker has for the business. He said, speaking of respect, he said he had immediate respect for Kurt Angle, Taker did, because he knew that he had a gold medal, and they always worked well together. He kind of took, Kurt Angle under his wing when they first worked together back in the day, and they've always had good matches. We hear from Shawn Michaels, who calls Undertaker the benchmark, which is true, because he's been around for so long. We even hear from Scott Hall, and he says he remembers Taker stealing the show one night, just tearing the house down on one house show back in, 93, 94, whatever. Hall left in 96, so he's probably talking 94, 95. And he never doubted Taker again after seeing him tear the house down that one night. Because, people would always have an issue with each other when one would have a bigger payoff than the other, would have a bigger paycheck than the other. But he never took exception with Taker again after seeing him just kill it that one house show. And he's like, yep, this guy deserves it. I have no issue with him having a bigger paycheck than me. We even hear from JBL, who remembers one match they had right after WrestleMania 12. I don't know if it was JBL's in-ring debut, but they had a singles match on TV right after WrestleMania 12. And JBL said that Taker was smiling from ear to ear that night because he was very happy with his performance. But at the same time, he says he has never even seen him in worse shape. Not back in 96, but right after, or rather going in to WrestleMania 33, the weekend of WrestleMania 33, he had never seen him in worse shape. I forgot who it was. It really bothers me that I can't remember. It might have been JBL. It might have been Shawn Michaels. I don't remember. But one of them calls him the Don Corleone of WWE, which is a great fucking reference. And you guys are not going to believe me when I tell you this. Maybe you will. I actually saw The Godfather for the first time only a few months ago with Alexis. It's her favorite movie of all time. I had never seen it before in full until 3 months ago. And I enjoyed it. I thought it was a really, really good movie. It's obviously a classic for obvious reasons. But now I know what the Don Corleone, I now know what that means after watching that movie. But that's a very accurate depiction of The Undertaker in WWE, calling him the Don Corleone of WWE. So we see him talking to Michael Hayes, and how Michael Hayes, I guess, would be the one to call him 5 months out to tell him to start preparing. And he would call him 5 months out to tell him to start preparing. That's how long it takes this guy to start getting his body in shape for WrestleMania. 5 months in advance. I'm sorry, I just dropped my chain over here. Sorry about that while I'm recording. But anyway, so that's a long time. 5 months is a very long time. So we see him, or rather we see him first. I was going to say, rehearsing for his WrestleMania entrance, but even before that, we see him sitting down with Roman Reigns and his wife, and Taker looks genuinely interested to talk to Roman Reigns. He genuinely looks at him like, hey, this is a really cool guy. I want to sit down and talk to him. It's Taker who approaches Reigns, not vice versa. That's mad respect. And I know they were having the match that week at WrestleMania 33, but at the same time, though, it's like he didn't have to do that. And it wasn't vice versa, like I said. It was Taker who went up to Roman. And they didn't even talk about WrestleMania 33. They were talking about WrestleMania 17 and all this other shit. They were talking about a lot of different stuff. It seemed like, and it looked like they were talking for a while before even addressing the fact they were facing off that weekend. He met with a lot of other people backstage, at WrestleMania itself. Or I forgot to mention, too, he said to Roman that Michelle wants a baby. I don't know if the kids are Michelle's or if they had the kids after that point. I don't remember. Because, again, I know he has kids, but I don't know if those are kids that Michelle had from another marriage or kids that he had from another marriage. I don't know, but he's kind of joking about Michelle wanting a baby, and he's just there to put the baby in her. It's a very weird conversation at certain points. But we hear from Roman, too, who knows that this match is a big fucking deal. He knows this is the biggest match of his career, and it was. No championship on the line, but there doesn't have to be, because only he and Brock are the only two people ever to have beaten Taker at WrestleMania, and that says a lot. So like I said, they go through his WrestleMania entrance, they rehearse it, which is cool to see. We see him meeting up with everyone backstage, people like The Miz and people like that. We see him talking to Chris Jericho, and again, we actually hear from Jericho, which is crazy, because, the footage was filmed right after this point. They probably filmed this right after the match, because he had his, short hair and whatever. He had the mustache. This was probably still when he was with WWE in early 2017. Because even when he came back in 2018, I think he had longer hair at the Greatest Royal Rumble pay-per-view. But anyway, what I was going to say was that Jericho was like, why are these cameras here? They're never shooting Taker outside of the ring and whatever. So even he knew that it was his last match, or thought it would be Taker's last match, because he thought it was weird that he was talking to the cameras, because that never really happens with Taker. And they have a very funny conversation. Taker jokes about how the entranceway is 80 feet long, and Jericho's like, what, 80 feet? Like, he's surprised. Like, weren't you at the rehearsal, dude, when they were rehearsing for WrestleMania? Like, how do you not know? How do I know it's 80 feet, but you don't? Like, they had photos of the set up online, like, days in advance, and this is showtime, and typical Jericho doesn't even know what the stage looks like the day of the show. He's, like, genuinely perplexed that the ramp is like a football field, like a football field size long here. That's how big this ramp is. So anyway, I just thought that was funny. Roman says that he wants to give Taker the last match that he deserves, and he feels the pressure of this match going in. And again, they're going off the assumption that this is Taker's last match. Not that he's going to be back next year. They think that this is it for The Undertaker. Okay? They bring back Jim Ross, who we also hear from a little bit as well, to call the match. And that was, JR's first major WWE appearance in several years, I think. So anyway, Taker, they talk about how he works no matter his condition. He worked that Hell in a Cell match with Mick Foley at King of the Ring in 1998 despite having a broken foot. The guy always goes in there, WrestleMania or otherwise, injured usually most of the time, and still you would never know, for the most part. Like, you can tell that he's not right or there's something wrong with him. But on the whole, though, he goes out there and never really gives off the impression that he's injured or that he's hurt or whatever, which is true professionalism. I mean, you can call it stupid if you want, but it's definitely professional in my opinion. So anyway, Michelle even brings up that he was burned, and this is a common story we've all heard before. I think Jericho brought this up in his book. We all knew about it at the time, too, but to hear about it from someone that was there and the guy himself is pretty surreal. I don't think Taker talks about it, but Michelle talks about it for him, how he was making his entrance for the Elimination Chamber main event in 2010. It was an Elimination Chamber match, and he was defending his World Heavyweight Championship, and he was in there till the end. He was the last guy eliminated before Jericho beat him with help of Shawn Michaels to win the World Heavyweight Championship. He burned himself to the point where it was visible. Like, I thought, this is going to sound so dumb, but I remember seeing him on Raw the next night, like when he kicked off the show with Shawn or whatever, and his chest was yellow and his lips were yellow, and I'm like, did this guy have mustard on his lips that he forgot to wipe off or something? Like, why is he yellow? And I felt bad when I realized years later that he actually had second-degree burns or whatever degree it was, and he still worked the match. He was pouring water on his chest the entire time. And the guy that fucked up the pyro that night, you never heard, or they never heard from him again. You never saw that guy again, and rightfully so, because you don't burn the Undertaker. Unless your name is Kane, you do not burn the Undertaker. So we see him getting injections before his matches, specifically the match at WrestleMania 33, which is just gross, but this guy is being held together by pins and needles at this point. That's how bad condition he is in at this point in his career. But he does admit, no matter the opponent, no matter the stage, no matter who or what it is, he always gets nervous beforehand. So listen, you look at Taker as the last outlaw, you look at him as the coolest motherfucker in the room. If even the Undertaker gets nervous before every time he goes out there, you are fucking lying to yourself. And I've heard a lot of people say, oh, you don't get nervous, blah, blah, blah. Bull fucking shit. Because if you don't, you just don't give a fuck anymore. Let's be honest here. I mean, I'm not the Undertaker, but I've been doing interviews for 10 years now. I got to talk to Otis recently. I got to talk to Otis last week, and I was shitting my pants. I got to talk to Eddie Mansfield from Dark Side of the Ring about a week ago. Okay, not literally shitting my pants, but I was very nervous. My heart was beating out of my chest, and I've been doing this for 10 years. Taker has been doing it for 30 with what he does, and he still gets nervous. So if you say you're not nervous, you're fucking kidding yourself, because you absolutely are, or you just don't care. So he always gets nervous. This occasion was no different. They show the match, and they make it look better than it was, and even if they show, even through the highlighted version, it still looks terrible. I was there. I defended the match. Watching it back, it was no good. The match sucked. The botched tombstone attempts were just bad. It was sad. It was a bad match, but it was also sad watching it. It wasn't really Roman's fault at all. It was more so Taker and just the fact that he wasn't there that night. He loses, of course, after a number of spears from Roman. You see Michelle kissing him, actually, after the match in the crowd, which was kind of cool. I don't know if I noticed that at the time, but you see footage of him kissing Michelle in the crowd in the front row, kind of out of character, which was rare for Taker. You see fans crying. Now, I wasn't crying personally, but it was a very emotional moment. I mean, I was there. You could feel the energy in the arena just die. No pun intended. After Taker went through the ramp and you knew it was over. Or thought it was over, I guess. He got an emotional hug from an emotional Triple H afterward in the hallway. Triple H, I believe, was the first person to walk up to him. Not even his own wife, who he hugged afterward. But I think Triple H was the first person there waiting for him, waiting to give him a hug and tell him it was a hell of a run, dude. It was a hell of a run. And it looks like Triple H is crying. Because, Triple H is a fan at heart. And to see one of his friends go out and end his career, it's heartbreaking. It's very sad. So I thought that was cool. You see Michelle giving him a hug, and she says at the time, I feel this is it for him. I really think this is it. And he said that before, but I think this is it for real. And obviously, it wasn't. We see him get a standing ovation from the rest of the roster. You see Sam Roberts there. I don't think Sam Roberts has ever told that story before, but imagine, again, people like to poop on Sam, and I like Sam, but he has been annoying on WWE TV in recent years. But imagine being him just like an outsider. He doesn't even work there, technically. As like an official analyst, I guess he does, but like he's not like a commentator or whatever on a regular basis. Imagine just being there to do the pre-show panel and then getting to see Taker, his final like few moments on, ever, what are supposed to be the final few moments of his career. Obviously it wasn't ultimately, but like that's a pretty cool spot to be. And that was just one thing I thought when I saw him standing backstage. You see like Bayley back there, or Bayley and Sasha, I think. Maybe not Bayley, but definitely Sasha I spotted. But anyway, we see Vince and, he thanks him in the back. He's like, oh, where were you? I was waiting for you in Gorilla, pal. Like, where are you? And, he thanks Taker, and he's like, oh, thanks for everything. And obviously that wasn't it. We, caught up with him in the doctor's office because Taker was still in a lot of pain at that point. But he admits afterward to the cameras, I don't think Mark was there that night. I knew deep down, he tried, but he just was not there. What kind of not bothers me, but the funny thing about this whole shit is that, Taker at the end of the day, he is the one who goes, Taker's the one who says, I'm going to come back and do this. He's not being forced. There's not a gun to his head saying, he's not being forced to say, I'm going to come back and do the match. But at the same time, though, Vince is the one making the offer. By all accounts, Vince calls, he picks up, he answers the call, he goes to do the match. So Vince is every bit as to blame here as Taker is himself. And he's like, oh, that's it for him, he's done, and then he brings him back. So it's like, it seems a little weird. But it was cool they were able to interview him for this, because you don't really hear Vince partake in many documentaries, whether it's a 24 or whatever. But he does for this, which I think was really cool. But he thought that Mark just wasn't there that night. And then to close it out, we see a preview of the next episode. This was a great note to end on, by the way. We see him wanting to redeem himself, and he's like, I got to redeem myself. I was not happy with my performance. I thought it was terrible. I got to come back better than ever and really kill it next year. So much for a retirement, I say. But I thought this was awesome. I really do. I cannot say this enough. Go watch this special. Undertaker, The Last Ride, Chapter 1, The Greatest Fear, available right now on the WWE Network. The first look is not enough. This episode really goes in deep on all the matches he's had in recent years, the ending of the streak. They don't talk about whose idea it was. He said that on like the Broken Skull sessions and stuff. They don't really talk about that here. Not really the place to do it, I don't think. They show a lot of cool footage, which I thought was very good. A lot of behind-the-scenes stuff. They go into great detail about what was supposed to be his final match at WrestleMania 33, which it wasn't. But I thought that was cool. And all the talking heads for this thing were awesome. Again, we got AJ, we got Jim Ross, you got Jericho, Taker himself, of course, Michelle McCool, you have Vince McMahon, you have Shane McMahon, Stone Cold Steve Austin, you have Ric Flair, a lot of people. Regardless of when this content was filmed, it's cool they were able to get as many people to talk about Taker as they did. So again, I cannot stress this enough. Go out of your way to check out Chapter 1, The Greatest Fear of Undertaker, The Last Ride. Episode 2 goes up next Sunday. Because there's no pay-per-view next week, there was one this week, so I'm like, oh, why don't I just watch it after the pay-per-view, which I did. I probably will watch it first thing next Sunday, then have my review up soon after. The episode clocks in at around 55 minutes, so it's a long one, but it's well worth it, dude. It's so fucking good. It's so good, so take the 55 minutes out of your day, watch the special, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. like the video, share the video, and subscribe to my channel, to this channel, for more daily content. Chapter 2 review coming up next Sunday. But before then, though, this is going up on Monday before Raw. We also have tomorrow my review of Iron Man 2 as part of the MCU Rewatch review series with Chris Mueller, the doc from Bleacher Report. We break down Iron Man 2 for 50 fucking minutes. We recorded it the other day. That's going up tomorrow, Wednesday, hashtag AskGSM, Thursday, Wrestle Rant Radio excerpts, Friday, Total Bellas review. A lot of content going up every single day right here on the channel, so subscribe today. With all that being said, guys, have a great one. I'm Graham GSM Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.